Hello and welcome back. Today we are looking at Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew, a very big fan favorite of Shakespeare's works. But at the same time, a very problematic work because it deals with a complicated topic, the topic of misogyny. As we looked at last time with the Comedy of Errors, Shakespeare poses questions on what marriage is all about and what marriage means. In Comedy of Errors, we had a debate between Luciana and Adriana about the nature of marriage. Luciana thinking that it was the wife's duty to be submissive and unwillful. And Adriana points out that Luciana, never having married, doesn't really know how practically things work. The Taming of the Shrew revisits this question and explores the idea of what makes a happy marriage. If you're looking for an answer to this question, it's not here. The play explores gender issues and marriage issues in a complicated way, posing lots of problems and asking lots of questions, but not really answering them. As is true with a lot of Shakespeare's complicated works, instead of providing a clear moral answer for us, he simply opens up a big can of worms and then leaves it there for us to stew on. In this play, Katharina is a shrewish young woman who likes to tell people her mind. She's independent and tough until she meets Petruchio, who then tames her. At the end of the play, she gives a speech promoting submissiveness to husbands. And there's been a lot of debate about what that final speech means. Are we supposed to take it ironically? Are we supposed to take it literally? A lot of that depends on how the actors portray that particular speech in that moment. Not to mention that it is the most complex and lengthy speech in the entire play, and given to Katharina, who is arguing for quietness and submission. Meanwhile, the women who seemed the most submissive and passive in the play, Bianca and the widow, now are exerting their independence over their husbands. It's been noted again and again throughout scholarships, for example in the article by Karen Newman in the back of the Folgers edition, that shrew taming was kind of a hot topic in Shakespeare's day. There were pamphlets written on how to deal with a wife who won't submit. There was public shaming and humiliation tactics for women who were not submissive in the home. And throughout England, the feminine ideal was the quiet, submissive wife. But complexly, at the same time, there is a woman ruling the country, Queen Elizabeth I. And this tension between how women are supposed to act and the fact that we are led by a woman is complicated and confusing. Shakespeare sure doesn't mind having strong female characters. Look back at the Henry VI plays. Margaret of Anjou, although she's a bit of a monster, is a powerful, powerful woman. Joan of Arc, the Duchess of Gloucester, not to mention many other times that Shakespeare gives women a lot of strength and power within his plays. So is he advising that we follow Petruchio's example and psychologically abuse our wives until they submit to us? It doesn't seem like it. However, a lot of people still have difficulty with the end of the play, especially considering that the psychological abuse that Katharina undergoes throughout this play, which is used to some extent for comic effect, is troubling and problematic. There are no easy answers. In my opinion, I feel we empathize with Katharina while also laughing at the overall picture that is being painted here. It's both slapstick, overdrawn, physical comedy, at the same time as we see some emotional connection with the characters. Another very fun aspect of this play are all of the convoluted and disguised identities. So many of the characters take on a different persona, take on a different identity. And all of this is really established at the beginning with this interesting frame story that's unique to this play. Before the play actually begins, there are two introductory scenes in which a duke finds a drunk tinker in a ditch and decides to play a joke on him. He takes this man to his house and dresses him up in finery, and when the man wakes up, he says, "Oh, you've finally come to your senses, you're the duke." And so this drunk tinker suddenly wakes up as if he's been in this fever fit for this longest time thinking he was a tinker, and he realizes, oh, he's a lord and a duke, and now he wants to see his wife. But they warn him that if he sleeps with young Bartholomew, who's disguised as the tinker's wife, the Duchess, he will probably have a relapse. So instead, they show him this play, which becomes the play The Taming of the Shrew. Another interesting play within a play that sometimes happens in Shakespeare, while also setting up for us all these false identities and the trickery and schemes that are going to be played out in the actual Taming of the Shrew play. There's loads of physical comedy as well. Characters are constantly getting beaten up, and this play lends itself very much to a lot of acrobatics. In fact, my favorite performance is by the American Conservatory Theater of San Francisco, an edition which explored the theater dell'arte style of Italy. A style that Shakespeare is probably leaning upon heavily, with lots of acrobatics and flips and tumbles. There's a lot of roughhousing as well as a lot of quick wit. It makes it a very visually appealing play. For example, when Petruchio and Grumio come up to Hortensio's door and Petruchio asks Grumio to knock, Grumio thinks he wants him to knock somebody. And when Petruchio clarifies by saying, "Knock me here, sir," Grumio is under the impression that Petruchio is asking him to beat him up. By the time Hortensio shows up to break things up between the two of them, Grumio already has his head spinning. He says, "Knock at the gate? Oh heavens! Speak you not these words plain, sir, knock me here and rap me here, knock me well and knock me soundly, and now you come with knocking at the gate?" And this is only the beginning of the comic violence throughout the play. So let's walk through the action here. Act 1 begins with Lucentio entering town with his servant Tranio, and he's ready to study in Padua, and study all kinds of good things. But Tranio says, well, don't forget to enjoy the pleasures of life while you're studying hard. Speaking of pleasures of life, in walks Bianca, a gorgeous young woman who is so quiet and such a perfect-looking wife. She's the daughter of Baptista, and she already has an army of suitors fighting over her, particularly Gremio and Hortensio. But Baptista won't give Bianca to anyone at this point because he has an older daughter, Katharina, who is cursed and froward. She has a really strong tongue and she terrifies everyone. And because Baptista is having a hard time marrying her off, he's not allowing his youngest daughter to marry yet. After observing this, Lucentio has already fallen in love with Bianca. Oh, she's so beautiful. And so Tranio and Lucentio cook up a plot where they're going to switch places. Tranio is going to pretend to be Lucentio since they've just entered into Padua, and he's going to ask for Bianca's hand, while Lucentio dresses up like a scholar and goes to become Bianca's tutor. Thus begins a series of false identities that continues throughout the entire play and makes this play a lot of fun. Their other servant, Biondello, jumps in on the plot, and he becomes the servant to Tranio, aka Lucentio, while Lucentio becomes Cambio. Meanwhile, Hortensio and Gremio have come to the agreement that although they're both fighting for Bianca's hand in marriage, they need someone to get rid of Katharina for them, so they team up to find a match for Katharina, someone who can handle her sharp tongue. Petruchio just happens to be coming to town. He's an old friend of Hortensio's, and his father is dead. He needs money. He needs to marry well. And Hortensio says, well, I could give you a wife with lots of money, but she is very, very sharp-tongued. She's a shrew. And Petruchio says, I don't care as long as there's money enough, especially when Hortensio and Gremio both decide to help sponsor Petruchio in his quest for marriage. So not only is he going to pick up a dowry, but he's also going to pick up an extra fortune from everybody else who's got vested interest in this match. They also at this moment meet Tranio disguised as Lucentio, who puts himself forth as another suitor for Bianca. And all together they decide to go begin Petruchio's attempts to woo Katharina. Act 2 begins showing Katharina's character even more thoroughly as she comes in with Bianca tied up, demanding that Bianca tell her which of her suitors she likes best. Baptista breaks it up and shows a lot of favoritism towards his sweet younger daughter instead of his grouchy older daughter. But here come all the suitors again. Petruchio makes his case, and at first, Baptista is dumbfounded that anybody wants Katharina. But as he seems very sincere and confident in his ability to win her over, Baptista agrees. Also, in comes Tranio, disguised as Lucentio, and says that he wants to put forth a request for Bianca as well. Not only are all of these wooers trying to win over Bianca, but now they have presented tutors to help out. Cambio, who's really Lucentio, is presented as a scholar who's going to help the daughters study Greek and Latin. And Licio, who's really Hortensio in disguise, is presented as a tutor of music. He's only been teaching Katharina for a few minutes though before she breaks the lute over his head. Baptista asks, why then thou canst not break her to the lute? And Hortensio answers, why no, for she hath broke the lute to me. I did but tell her she mistook her frets, and bowed her hand to teach her fingering, when, with the most impatient devilish spirit, frets call you these, quoth she, I'll fume with them. And with that word she struck me on the head, and through the instrument my pate made way. And there I stood amazed for a while, as on a pillory, looking through the lute, while she did call me rascal fiddler and twangling jack, and 20 such vile terms, as she had studied to misuse me so. Petruchio says that this doesn't scare him away, but rather piques his interest even more, and so he and Katharina have a private conversation, which turns into a witty repartee, back and forth, both of them punning off of each other. Katharina refuses his advances, but when Baptista comes back in, Petruchio says that she has agreed to marry him next Sunday, and she's only continuing to pretend to be shrewish in public. One more thing before we finish Act 2. Old man Gremio and Tranio, who is pretending to be Lucentio, are both competing for Bianca in front of Baptista. Of course, Hortensio's not there because he's busy playing tutor. And now that Katharina is safely out of the way, Bianca is available. So Baptista just decides that he will give her to whoever can assure her the most wealth. It looks at first like that's Tranio. It looks at first like that's Tranio/Lucentio. However, his father is still alive, and therefore the wealth that belongs to his father, which will one day be his, is not actually his yet. And what happens if he dies before his father? So Baptista says, if your father will assure that the wealth will belong to you, I will give you Bianca. But Gremio rubs his hands and says, haha, what father would ever give all of his wealth before he dies to his son? In Act 3, Lucentio, playing Cambio, and Hortensio, playing Licio, are tutoring Bianca. Both of them are trying to use their tutor time to slip her love notes and win her to their affection. In the midst of their competition, Bianca begins to show more independence of thought than she previously has. Although she looked so sweet and benign and gentle, she exerts her influence over these two fellows here. And although she plays with Lucentio a little bit, she definitely favors him over Hortensio. And as Hortensio watches this, he gives up on the idea of marrying Bianca. After all, if she's going to be flirting with a tutor, he doesn't want anything to do with her. And so the day of the wedding comes, and Petruchio shows up very late, and dressed absolutely ridiculously in basically a clown costume. Katharina and everyone else are mortified, and they try to talk him down, but he refuses and goes to the wedding in his crazy costume, and then acts awful at the wedding, swearing in church, kicking the priest, smooching Katharina especially loudly, and afterwards he says that he must leave immediately with Katharina. Everyone begs him to stay for the marriage feast, including Katharina, but he refuses. And when she demands that he stay and says, fine, go, but I'm going to stay, he grabs her up and fights through the whole crowd and escapes. Everyone else throws up their hands and goes to the wedding feast without them. We get to Act 4, where his taming really happens, in which he refuses to let her sleep or eat. And he acts very crazy, beating all of the servants for pretended faults, just to keep Katharina terrified and dizzy. He explains his policy in a short soliloquy. Thus I have politically begun my reign, and 'tis my hope to end successfully. My falcon now is sharp and passing empty, and till she stoop, she must not be full gorged, for then she never looks upon her lure. Another way I have to man my haggard, to make her come and know her keeper's call. That is, to watch her, as we watch these kites, that bait and beat and will not be obedient. She ate no meat today, nor none shall eat. Last night she slept not, nor tonight she shall not. As with the meat, some undeserved fault I find about the making of the bed, and here I'll fling the pillow, there the bolster, this way the coverlet, another way the sheets, and amid this hurly I intend that all is done in reverent care of her. And in conclusion, she shall watch all night, and if she chance to nod, I'll rail and brawl, and with a clamor keep her still awake. This is a way to kill a wife with kindness, and thus I'll curb her mad and headstrong humor. He that knows better how to tame a shrew, now let him speak, 'tis charity to shew. And so we get the expression, kill with kindness. He acts like all the food that's prepared for her is no good, and so throws it out, not allowing her to eat any of it. He acts like her bed is not well made, and so he doesn't let her sleep in it. And therefore, doing everything out of love for her, he keeps her perpetually tormented. Meanwhile, back in Padua, Hortensio is telling Tranio that Bianca is not a faithful woman. After all, she is flirting with Cambio over there. And taking off his disguise of Licio, he says, I'm actually Hortensio, and I give up on her. I'm gonna go marry this nice old widow over here who really loves me. After he leaves, Tranio and Bianca and Lucentio all chat revealing their true identities. See, they have a problem. They need a father for fake Lucentio to promise all of his property so that Baptista will agree to the marriage. But they can't really get Vincentio because, one, Tranio is pretending to be Lucentio, so surely Lucentio's father would see through that. And second, they're not sure what Vincentio would really say. So they find some old merchant who's coming into town. They tell him that he's in danger for his life, and so to protect him, they're putting him in the witness protection program. And they're changing his identity to Vincentio. All he has to do is come with them and make this promise. All of his property and wealth to his son Lucentio, and everything will be fine. So now we have a fake Lucentio, we have a fake Vincentio, and we have the scholar Cambio, who's really the real Vincentio. In scene 3, Petruchio continues his torment of Katharina, finding fault in all the beautiful new dresses that are made for her and the beautiful hats. And so, when she disagrees with him, he refuses to let them go back to her sister's wedding. Back in Padua, the fake Vincentio and the fake Lucentio are presented before Baptista, and they go through the whole process of winning him over to marry his daughter Bianca to Lucentio. Meanwhile, the real Lucentio, who's pretending to be the tutor Cambio, takes Bianca and runs off to elope, while Baptista and the others make final arrangements. Back to Petruchio and Katharina and Grumio, who are finally on their way back to Padua. Petruchio continues his power play games where he tells Katharina to say things that are not true. For instance, he points to the sun and asks her to call it the moon. When she refuses, he's about to turn around and go back, but she begs his patience and says she will call things whatever he wants to call them as long as he will continue to go to Padua. Forward, I pray, since we have come so far, and be it moon or sun or what you please, and if you please to call it a rush candle, henceforth I vow it shall be so for me. And Petruchio says, I say it is the moon. And Katharine says, I know it is the moon. And Petruchio answers, nay, then you lie, it is the blessed sun. And Katharina says, then God be blessed, it is the blessed sun. But sun it is not when you say it is not, and the moon changes even as your mind. What you will have it named, even that it is, and so it shall be for Katharine. At that moment they run into the real Vincentio, who's coming to town to see his son. Uh-oh. And Petruchio tells Katharina that that guy over there is a beautiful young maiden, and has her go present herself to the young maiden. So Katharina has to walk up to an old man and say, young budding virgin, fair and fresh and sweet, whither away, or where is thy abode? Happy the parents of so fair a child, happier the man whom favorable stars allots thee for his lovely bedfellow. And so along with all the people transforming one into another, there is a transformation of Vincentio into a young woman in the eyes of Katharina. Since Katharina has passed the test, Petruchio greets Vincentio and hears who he is and says, ah, I know your son. He's in Padua and he just got married. This is news to Vincentio. And he's not sure he trusts these people who call him a young virgin. But Hortensio, who's going along with them, vouches for them. Act 5. Act 5. Petruchio and Vincentio arrive at the house of Lucentio. And when they knock at the door, the fake Vincentio pokes his head out the window and tells them off. When Petruchio announces Vincentio as Lucentio's father, the fake Vincentio says, thou liest. His father has come from Padua and is looking out the window. Vincentio says, art thou his father? And the fake Vincentio says, aye, sir, so his mother says, if I may believe her. In comes Biondello, who then sees the real Vincentio and goes, ugh! And in order to save their complex plot, denies Vincentio. In comes Tranio, who's still dressed as Lucentio, and when Vincentio sees him, he quickly gets the impression that Tranio has killed his master and taken his place. With everybody there, Tranio accuses the real Vincentio of being a fake, and orders him to be thrown into prison. Just at that moment, in comes Lucentio, who's married to Bianca, the real Lucentio. And he kneels to his father and greets him warmly, and explains the whole thing and straightens everything out. Baptista's a little bit taken aback at having been so manipulated, and Vincentio is fuming and furious at Tranio. But all is well. Lucentio says, love wrought these miracles. Bianca's love made me exchange my state with Tranio, while he did bear my countenance in the town. And happily I have arrived at the last unto the wished haven of my bliss. What Tranio did, myself enforced him to. Then pardon him, sweet father, for my sake. We come to the final scene where they're at the wedding feast and everyone is happy together. All things have been straightened out in between the scenes. But everyone still assumes that Petruchio got the worst deal of all of them. But when Petruchio says, "I will bet 100 crowns that my wife will do better than any of yours in a test of obedience," the others laugh and say they'll go along with it. Each of them calls to his wife, who's in the other room, to see which one will most obediently arrive. When Lucentio sends for Bianca, she sends the message back that she is busy and cannot come. When Hortensio sends a message to his wife, she says that surely he's jesting and she will not come. In fact, she bids Hortensio to come to her. When Petruchio commands that Kate come, she comes immediately, and then drags Bianca and the widow with her. When Petruchio asks her to stomp on her hat, she does so. And then he asks her to tell the other women what true obedience is all about. In the end, everyone celebrates the fact that Petruchio has won the bet, and not only that, but has a new wife. Baptista gives a second dowry because his daughter is so changed that it's almost as if he has a new daughter. And so we come to the end of the Taming of the Shrew. And I'll leave it up to you how to feel about that ending. Thanks for watching. You can click to subscribe or to watch another video. Next time we'll be shifting away from comedies to Titus Andronicus, the most violent and vengeful of all of Shakespeare's plays. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.